Hello and welcome to the DoneJS contributors meeting. Today is Friday, January 5th, 2018, our first stream 2018. My name is Jason Lahara, coming to you from Long Beach, California. Today we've got a lot of contributors today. It's good to see you guys. You want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Good to see you.
So, hey, I'm Julian from Germany. So, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Julian.
Hey, I'm Kevin. I am in Downers Grove, Illinois. Just moved into a new place.
Welcome to the new haunts.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm Manuel. I'm calling from Denver.
Good to see you.
Matthew, Kentucky.
Hello. And Sheriff, is your audio working? Maybe? That's a shame. Sheriff, who I believe is from Algeria. I'm going to feel really bad if I don't get that right. Good to see you, Sheriff, even though we can't hear you. Okay, so today we're going to go through demos to kind of talk about what we have been working on these past 2 weeks. And then we'll move on to topics. We have a couple posted in the forums. I will get us started. Let me share my screen. So I've mainly been working on DoneJS 4.0, but last week I kind of went through some bugs over a couple of days. So got lots of little fixes out. So there was this can route push state issue in which if you had a link like this that had a hash in the URL and then you clicked on it and you had maybe some CSS that was supposed to highlight that element or whatever, that did not work correctly with can route push states. So that is now fixed in the latest patch version of can route push state. Can jQuery, I broke some things in a patch release of can jQuery while I was trying to add custom event delegation support to the package from canutil. And I fixed my regressions, and now this is working correctly. So thank you, Julian, for filing the issue that got me to fix this. Another issue, this was in CanView import, but kind of noticeable if you're building a DoneJS application. Basically, do we have a code example of? Okay, I don't have a good code example of what it looked like, but essentially, if you had a template that used can import, and then inside of it, it uses state or is resolved or something. With CanJS 3, there was this error about state not being in the current scope, and that was a false positive. So that is fixed in the latest patch version of CanView import. Shout out to, I think, his normal name, people name. First name is Jim, so thanks to Jim for
Just say name.
Just name. I was trying to differentiate from username.
How did you fix that? I'm just curious what the fix was.
So in 3, basically Kevin outlines exactly what it was. Previously, we were adding a new scope, and that's why the import promise wasn't in the current scope, or it was having to scope walk. So the fix was essentially still adding it, but indicating that it wasn't a new context. Yeah,
so in 3.0 in CanView scope, we have this idea of meta context. So there's this one called not context, and then in 4.0, there's another one called special. So we allow scope walking as long as you're walking to one of those things, and you're not walking to an actual scope. So.
Cool. Okay. This was kind of a long-standing issue. If you're using Done component in a DoneJS application, if you exported your view model like this, there would be a warning about assigning a define map or a constructor type to the view model property because Done component was incorrectly using lowercase view model instead of uppercase view model. So that's now fixed in the, it was released in a patch version of Done Components. Thank you to BearDev for pointing this out. We had an issue with our bindings where if you had a binding that was like VM : S something, and then it had an uppercase, there was an uppercase character, when we would encode this to be able to represent it within the DOM, we would encode this as VM : S : U : because that's how we encode uppercases. And then when it was decoded, it was converted into VM space U : because then there would be a S : to represent the U. So this is fixed in the latest version of Can Attribute Encoder. Basically, the fix for this was kind of a cheat. We don't, I want to say this correctly. I think we don't support uppercase. We don't support bindings that have, we don't support spaces and bindings that have uppercase characters. I think I said that right. So it was easy enough to make sure that we just decode the uppercase before we would do any space decoding, if that makes sense.
Can I talk about this one real quick?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so this issue, or this fix, is kind of a band-aid over a bigger problem. And there's a couple of issues that got added to Can Attribute Encoder based on this. So if anyone out there is really interested in regular expressions and wants to go in and basically refactor this whole thing to not use all these replacer functions that are error prone because they happen in order, right? We have specific sets of characters that we replace, but we do them in order. What we need to do is really do this with a single regular expression and a replacer function that does it all at once. So if anyone out there wants to do that, this is probably an easy and somewhat easy and fun thing to do if you like regular expressions.
Yeah, and just to point out, I couldn't see your screen. I know I'm presenting to everyone. So just to point out what you were talking about, this is how Can Attribute Encoder works right now, where it has all of these regular expressions that it uses to like encode and decode characters. So the couple issues you filed were for refactor. Oh, you have it in the issue. I should have just pointed to that. Is to kind of refactor these portions, and there's 2 issues linked to from the PR that I submitted. If anyone wants to take a look at those. This was a big one. In CanJS 3, we added, we're dropping support for setting a viewModel property with a binding that just looks like this. So like saying title equals something to set a viewModel property called title, that is deprecated. So we had these warnings saying you should use this different syntax instead. The problem is that we were applying that to every attribute that was on a component. So if you wanted the component to just have a title property on it so that you could hover over it and see a title, or if you had ARIA descriptors or any other just regular DOM properties, we would have warnings for that. So we still have this warning. The fix that I placed was based on what Matthew suggested. Basically, we check to see if you have that attribute name as a property on your viewModel. So if you don't have a title property on, or a title property on your viewModel, we're not going to warn about you trying to use that binding syntax. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's fixed and released in CanStash 3.11.9. And then last one second to last one, sorry, I'm a little bit over time. There were a couple of cancel issues, mainly with what should happen if you didn't have, if you wanted to use like the default content, or you were using self-closing tags because you didn't want to customize the template or what was used in the slot, and you just wanted to use the default. So there were a couple of bugs across a couple of different packages. Those are now all fixed in the latest patch versions of Can Component and Can Stash. The last one I just released this morning was a regression in Can Fixture, where if you were trying to send something that wasn't an object, so if you were trying to send an array or form data or an array buffer or any of those types, Can Fixture was incorrectly converting all of those into objects. So then your fixture would get back the wrong data. And this is fixed in a patch release of Can Fixture. And thank you to Greg for submitting the original, for submitting this issue, submitting a PR to fix it for form data. We appreciate people contributing back code too. Okay, that's all I have. Chris, did you have anything to demo?
So I don't. I wasn't on open source this week. But the week before this week, I was working on the Can.dom mutate stuff, and Chasen said a lot of things, but he also worked on that this week and got the latter half of what I couldn't finish released. So thanks for doing that. Those things are merged into the major branches. I'm really happy about it. It's something that I personally have been working on for quite a few months here and there. So it's really nice to get it in, especially before 4.0.
For sure. Thank you for working on that. And I just did the very smallest portion to contribute to getting that merged in and released. So props to you for working on that. Julian, did you have anything that you wanted to demo?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Kevin?
Yep, let me share my screen. Hopefully you can see these amazing docs.
Beautiful docs.
Cool. So this week I worked on a lot of documentation and going through guides and recipes. But the first thing is this. In Stash, we have this key operator called scope, which hopefully people have seen. This is in 3.0 also. But this is so you can access things on the scope directly in your Stash templates. So the one that I added this week is scope.find. So in 4.0, we're removing scope walking. There's no, we won't automatically walk up the scope if something is not found like we used to and always have done and Mustache has done forever. But if you do want to do that now in 4.0, you can use scope.find. So find is basically what used to happen if you just looked for this key exclamation. Now you can use scope.find and look for that, and it will behave the same way as it did in 3.0 if you don't want to use the more explicit stuff that you can do now. So there's these docs here in Stash, and then there's also a link here that points you to the actual method, which is in Can View Scope on Can View Scope's prototype, which explains exactly how scope walking works, and this is basically the docs from 3.0 for scope.get. Cool. The other thing that I worked on is this CTA bus map guide, going through and getting it to work. So I'll just show some of the code. There was a couple of changes. The first one is stupid. I had to change the link here because pre-9 is broken or whatever. Can.all pre-9 is not working. So I changed it to use an older one so that would work until we get the next build out, which should be sometime soon. And then the other thing is I changed this to not use inserted events on components. So now instead of this used to have an inserted event here on this Google Map View component that would actually set up the Google Map. Now this has been moved into this connected callback, which is something new that we've added. So you can use the connected callback on a view model this will get called when the view model is connected to a component. So when the component that this view model is a part of is inserted into the DOM. And you can access the element that gets passed to there. So that was the biggest change, was this, using connected callback instead of inserted events. You can still use inserted events if you want to, but it's kind of ugly. You have to add the code yourself. So I think we'll talk about that later, how want to make that easier for people. But the best way is to use the new connected callback. Cool. I think that's it for me.
Sweet. Any questions? Cool. Thanks, Kevin. Manuel, do you have anything to demo?
Sure. Let me share my screen. Sure. So the last couple of days I've been working on this issue that I actually started working on a few months ago. And then I got stuck and work on something else. Basically, this was reported by Julian, and it's a problem with Ken import and the new optimized build. And what I did was just to create a sample, a small app where I can replicate the problem. And it's pretty much the same thing that Julian showed in the issue. What we are doing is using Ken import to grab a component, and when the internal promise is resolved, we just render the component. And there is nothing special about the component. It's just an H2 rendering the title property. And if you load it in development mode, which is the tab that I'm showing right now, it works. But I already built the optimized version of it. And when you reload it, like nothing happens. So I'm gonna skip forward some hair pulling until I figure out where the problem was, and it was around the don't auto render stuff. Basically, the promise where the app was rendering, the zone where the app was rendering wasn't resolving. So if you go back to the if you inspect the elements tab. There is nothing actually rendered in the body. There is no X-home component. So what I did in order to
hey Manuel,
sure.
Can I interject something? Because I think you skipped over some stuff that people might not know. If you go back to elements,
Sure.
Yeah, what you're saying is that there are no elements there, and the reason why is that done auto render renders the app within a zone, and it uses a zone to know when the app is finished rendering, and then it injects into the body. And it does that because if you've server-side rendered, that content's already in the page, and it doesn't want to like inject the app into the body while it's still being, rendered. So it waits, and then it does a swap. And so that's why there's nothing there, because this particular zone never finished and continue.
Okay, thanks. I think when I started working on this, the use debug option wasn't there. What you're seeing in my editor right now is the main module, the one that generates done auto render. And I think Matthew recorded a video about how to use the debugging stuff in auto render and CanZone. So what I did was let's change this actually to true, and I'm gonna refresh my browser here, and I should probably have like modified the timeout, but if we wait a little bit, we get this error. And I think what's happening, and Matthew can correct me if I'm wrong, is that CanZone now throws an error when there is an async operation that didn't finish. So if you click the first one in here, it points out to a code inside the optimized loaded itself, and basically what's happening, and added a breakpoint inside of the script load. What's happening here? We create a script tag to load bundles in the optimized loader. So I'm gonna put a breakpoint inside of the callback that should be executed either when the script finishes loading or it errors out. And let's do some debugging. There is a clear timeout inside of the script load. So basically, when the script load events fires, what we do is just to clean out some of the callbacks to avoid having memory leaks. And what I did was just to step into this with Matthew's help. And what you're seeing right now might be surprising because you are inside of actual code instead of the native implementation. But this is how CanZone works basically. It just grabs the async functions and stuff that are available either in the window object or other objects, and add some code to know when to grab the internal functionality and know when it's done. And when I step over this, the problem is evident. Well, zone is available, but there is no zone current. And what this means is that the clear timeout where we're coming from is not running inside the zone where the app is rendered. And I didn't know what was happening with that, but Matthew explained to me that the problem was on load and on error, and on the other event handlers were not being grabbed by CanZone, so that was the bug. And if I go back to my optimized build, and let me actually go to the top and comment out. I'm going to comment this out, which is the current version of the Slim Loader, and just use the alternative out event listener to do the same thing. And if you reload this time, the app works as expected. And what I did work yesterday was to fix that problem in CanZone. And I'm not going to talk too much about the changes in here, but I think the most important part is that what, let me show the get, the function we use to graph all those properties is down here. And basically what we do is just to get the property names, all the property names of the HTML element prototype, and that should have all the on event name methods. And we filtered those out, and we added to the CanZone internal logic to make sure that those are grabbed too. And I think that's it for me.
Cool. Thanks, Manuel. Any questions? Cool. Matthew, do you have something to present?
Yeah, I upgraded Bitballs this week. I worked on a lot of like weird internal stuff that would be cool to talk about, but it's kind of in limbo, so I won't talk about that. I'll talk about my Bitballs upgrade though. So let me see if I can share my screen. I feel like it's cool to, you know, this Bitballs is a real app. We use it and stuff. So it's a demo app if you haven't seen it before. DoneJS/Bitballs is the repository. It's a great example app for, you know, DoneJS projects. So I upgraded it to use DoneJS 2.0, which includes CanJS 4.0. The PR is here. Maybe I'll put this in the forum post so people can take a look at it, so you can actually see all the side-by-side changes. There was a couple of things I wanted to, talk about. One weird thing, just as a footnote, there used to be an each helper on define map, or I don't know where that came from, but now it's used the for each, like kind of like native arrays.
Yeah, there used to be.
Okay,
we removed it. I can explain why if you're interested. But
sure, go ahead.
So now, if you look up a helper, it will look at the context first. So if your view model is a define map and you say each in stash, it will use the define maps each before it uses the built-in helper. So we had to remove each because it conflicts with one of our built-in helpers.
Gotcha. Okay. I was thinking maybe that you just like let it, you know, you're just patching in all of the array stuff or something. But
no, yeah, for each was already there. We just removed.
It's a very easy one to figure out. It's like, oh, each throws. Okay, let's try for each. Yep, that works. So
well, and also, was each ever documented, or was it just there? I feel like it wasn't even documented in CanDefine, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, right. Sorry, don't mean to derail.
Anyways, yeah, I want to go so by far the hardest. Hard. Yeah, I guess I would say it was hard. The most difficult part of upgrading, I think, to CanJS 4.0 is the templates because of not having automatic scope walking. So I want to go over some of the stuff that I kind of figured out over time. When you have these, you run into the problem of scope walking. Not having scope walking is when you have a bunch of what do you call these types of helpers? Like
section helpers.
Section helpers, yes. Anytime you have section helpers, they almost always create like a new scope within them. Well, maybe that's not always true. Like if doesn't, so that's wrong.
I think just each
for certain types of helpers. Yeah, each and with in particular. they create their own new scope. That means that you can't reference the top level scope inside of here. So basically, you need to do a lot of if you want to reference stuff up, you got to either you can use kind of pathfinding to do that is one way, and that's the way I actually started. I was like, okay, I want to be explicit, so I need to go up here, but then I need to go up one more level, so dot dot slash dot dot, and then inside here it's like, okay, now this is dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot. It's like, oh, this becomes a lot, and it's not easy to look at a template and know what level of scope you're at. So that's kind of a difficult way to go. Luckily, there's a scope.root available now as well. And so eventually I was like, okay, well, I know all this stuff is on the view model, so just scope.root lets me access the view model. And that became the much easier solution. Once I figured that out, it was much easier for me to update templates. The other thing you run into a lot if you have an existing app is you'll have like %sign event for these kind of special things, and there's like a %sign element. Those just become scope.event. Those are very easy to fix. Yeah, what else did I want to say about this? Oh yeah, well, just back to this kind of this scope finding idea. Another thing I struggled with, actually, this template does not have it. Let me see if there's another template that has. If you don't use each and instead use kind of the what's that called again? This type of helper.
Section helper.
Section helper. If you use kind of that section helper syntax to iterate, I thought there was one. Okay, you see here, this is an example of when I was first starting out, and I was using the dot dot and all that stuff. Eventually, I figured it out in the other templates. One thing I learned is one thing I really struggled with is like, okay, what do the ending tags need to look like? Like, do they need to look like this whole thing? Like, do I need to do this? But actually, you can kind of omit that. And actually, the easiest way is you don't have to do anything. You can just do this. So that's a huge thing, because that for me that was like, okay, when I got these really long section helpers, how do I close them? You can just close them like this. So that's a good thing to know. Anyways, there's something else that I really wanted to talk about. Yeah. Here's another example of that. You don't actually need to do that. You can just close it like this. But it is kind of nice to have that in there just to kind of visually know that this is closing games of level for rounds. Anyways, yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, I wanted to say. Yeah, so this is kind of like this is how 4.0 is going to work. You can always use scope.root to access the root. We've talked about, we were kind of internally talking about maybe in 5.0, or it doesn't actually have to be 5.0 because it wouldn't be a breaking change, but maybe shortly after 4.0, there's just one called root maybe, or maybe actually is named after the element. So like this is game details. I think the tag is game-details. Let me see. This is the hardest one to find because it's so long. Yeah, game details. So we're thinking about maybe this becomes game details. Like the root view model is named after the element. So it makes it very easy. What?
Sorry to interrupt. Has that been proposed? That's the first time I've heard that idea.
Well, Justin proposed it in Slack today.
Oh, today? Oh, okay.
So I don't know if we're going to adopt any of those. I kind of do like game details because it's like, yeah, this is my game details thing. But anyways, whatever. We're going to find better solutions to this. Something that works now. Tell me if I'm right on this, Kevin. Right now, I can do player equals value, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then you can reference it like that. This is actually the better way to do it. I wish I think I did know about it. Maybe I didn't know about it. I don't know. But I didn't do it that way when I created Bitballs. But now knowing about it, it's like, oh yeah, that's way better because it's like, it's just like JavaScript is. In JavaScript, you create a local variable, like you're in a for loop or something. You create a local reference to the current item, and you use that as a variable. There's no like magic scope finding stuff going on there. It's everything's a variable. So that's a much better way to go because you can directly reference stuff. You can call this whatever you want to call it. Inside here, I could have done, what is this? This is stat, I think. good stack.type, that kind of thing. It makes it much clearer to do it this way. So hopefully we come up with some good solution that kind of makes this the default, or I don't know what we're gonna do, but it's something to keep in mind. But anyways, yeah, using this is a great way to go. Or if you already have some existing code that makes this difficult for some reason, I can't think of a reason why. Well, I think mainly because this syntax is only supported in each and with. So each and with support that, but like if you have some stuff like this and you don't want to try to convert that to an each for some reason, then using scope.root whenever you need to do that is a good choice. All right, I've rambled enough about that kind of thing. I actually missed one here. I almost always converted everything to what do you call this? Call expressions. At first, I thought that I had to, but I guess I didn't actually have to, but I did it anyways.
It's possible that when you started, you did have to.
Okay.
But you don't have to.
That's funny. Yeah, okay. Well, anyways, yeah, that's that. Then there was some other kind of weird stuff I wanted to quickly try to go over. That's by far the biggest thing you have to change, but there's some other like JavaScripty things, I think. Yeah, like there's no longer a can stash / helpers / route. It's now its own package, can stash route helpers. So it's once you know that, it's fine. So yeah, when you're using like these route URL and that kind of stuff, you need to make sure that you've imported that. Yeah, this is like I was talking about the event, scope event.
Which some of these things like the percent event to scope.event, we already have code mods for that within can migrate. So those aren't manual changes that people need to make.
Yeah, and the other thing is, so there's no longer an inserted event. Well, there is, but it's not automatic. You have to kind of configure that yourself. So using new packages, can DOM events and can DOM mutate DOM events. And you just need to like copy and paste this code. Basically, you don't need to understand it. But this is configuring so that there is a special inserted event that's kind of globally fired. Something Chris worked on. So yeah, it's what I did is I created a module which does that. It's global, and then I just import it in wherever I needed. This particular module uses the inserted event, so I import it here. Last thing I'm going to talk about. If you have, these are kind of rare, but if you have a helper which creates, which then renders, like this is a string, it's going to render this string in a new stash template. So it actually calls stash to create a new template. When you're doing this, you need to make sure you pass along any helpers. And more importantly, probably, is that you want to pass along the node list. Node list is very important because this is how CanJS knows how to like tear things down properly. So this actually changed in 4.0. Actually, no, the node list did not change. It's still on options. But to get the helpers, I think it used to be options.helpers. Is that right? I can't see where it is. Yeah, it used to be options.helpers. Now to get the helpers, you need to do scope template context helpers. So just a minor thing. These are like not a very typical type of helper, but if you have a pretty advanced one, this is something BitBalls does to dynamically create the correct can import for correct module.
I'm not sure why that last one was changed. I don't know why we don't just keep it as options.helpers. So it's possible we could add that back, but like you said, this is a really not documented, not used feature.
Yeah, not super common. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I had to say about this. It wasn't too hard. I ran into bugs is the main thing that blocked me. But once those are fixed, it was pretty easy. And once I figured out the how to properly upgrade templates.
Cool. Thank you, Matthew. And Sheriff, I know your audio isn't working. So I think we're going to go to topics. Kevin, you were the first one who posted How should we handle can migrate for 3.0 to 4.0? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So that one of the things that Matthew just talked about, adding the inserted and removed events back in, is something that we're going to write a code mod for. So we'll write a code mod so that anywhere you're using inserted and removed event, or before remove and removed events in your components, the code mod will add those imports for you and call those functions like we need to. But that stuff's not available in 3.0. So like someone who's migrating from 2.0 to 3.0 doesn't want that code mod to run. So we need some way of keeping our code mods separate for the different migrations that we have now. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. Do we want to have a separate project that's like can migrate 3 to 4, or what? Do people have ideas on how we should package these code mods so that people can use the ones they want?
Why don't you want that to run if
you're migrating from can 2.3 to 3.0, you don't want to add can DOM events and can DOM mutate.
Do you not run these things? Do you not run these things individually? You just run all CanJS code mods, or like how would you accidentally? Oh, you can do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, in can migrate, you have the option to run specific code mods or just let it run wild in your code base and use all of the code mods available to it. Which, isn't great if we start including the 4.0 code mods and people are upgrading to a later version of CanJS 3.
Yeah, I think I think it makes sense to have some type of grouping, kind of like how, Babel has like these presets, which are just kind of groups of plugins. It makes sense to me that code mods would have some way to group them under one set, So you could have CanJS 3 code mods and CanJS 4 code mods.
Yeah, I wonder if we could kind of extend that idea so that it's kind of like the presets where instead of like an alternative would be something like you call can migrate and you pass in like the version that you're upgrading to or something like that. But I think your idea of the kind of presets is better, where we could have any groupings of any of the individual code mods that are in can migrate and make those like one group. So we could have the CanJS 3 group, which upgrades, which has everything that it does now, and then the CanJS 4 group would do all of the new stuff, and maybe also the CanJS 3, or maybe we'd leave that out.
I think you'd have to group them like your from and your to. You know what I mean? You'd have to have 2 to 3 and then 3 to 4, and then if you just wanted to, and then that'd make it very easy to create a 2 to 4, is that it would just be all of those, right?
Yeah, I personally don't think that we should encourage people to ever upgrade 2 major versions in one go. So I would say let's make a grouping for like all CanJS 3 stuff, make a grouping for all CanJS 4 stuff. Those are my thoughts.
So what all will be in this like 3 to 4? Is it just the inserted removed right now? I'm just thinking like the easiest thing, if that's the only thing that changes in can migrate, it just reads in a list of all the transforms. We could just have a black list or white list, and then a command line option that says, migrate to a particular version, and we update. So you have to specify 3 or 4.
I think you have to. Sorry. The other thing is some of the template stuff could be. I don't know. Do we have any template code mods yet? I don't know if we've done those yet.
Yeah, we have them.
You have two. Yeah, it's like this, like the %sign event to scope dot event. That's very easy to fix. But like the scope.
We have those already. Yeah, code mods.
Oh.
Yeah, we don't. So to answer your question, Chris, it's not just the like inserted remove stuff. Stuff like switching from can/route/helpers to can/route/helpers, and I feel like we can probably code mod the can batch start to can queues batch start and some stuff like that. So there are other things that are
route ready to route start.
Sorry?
Route ready to route start.
Yeah, which we will be able to add code mods for CanJS 3 for those, because those were deprecated and then added. in 3. But still, there are like there's a few things that are 4.0 specific.
All right.
Cool. I think that's a good idea. I think that solved the problem.
Cool. So keep one tool. Maybe have. Are we going to run with having like groupings of code mods so you can pass in a flag and it is a group, similar to how we have you can pass in the like -- transform and then give it a specific one. We could have a transform that is like all of the CanJS 3 ones or all of the CanJS 4 ones.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's how we'll do it because it's easiest.
Cool. Sounds good. Matthew, you posted. Okay. So you posted about easier compatibility with a CAN 3.4 package, which is directly related, but not exactly the same as what we just talked about. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Do you want to go over that again? You are on mute.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's just a little bit of code that can DOM mutate stuff here. Maybe I see if I can find that. Let me see if I can find that in Bitballs, and I'll show that again. Yeah, I was just thinking about like how we insert events, something people definitely use in their components. It's like I was starting to think, I was like, whoa, we need an easy way for people to do this. Like not everyone does code mods, code mods is a very fine solution here. So like I was thinking, like how do we tell people to do this? Like this is weird, right? I mean, this is well, it's not weird. It's low level. It's not something that anyone like. I need to do this to get a inserted event. That doesn't, it's low level. I guess is the only thing. So it's like, what's the easy way for this? So I was like, well, maybe if we could just make a package that does this and nothing else. Yeah, that's kind of silly because it's such a little amount of code. But then all you have to do is, instead of doing this, you just do require, I don't know, CAN DOM events inserted legacy or something like that. It's like, we'll just create one. It doesn't matter. And then people can just use that. And that's a lot easier to tell people is, hey, you want the insert event. It's no longer provided by default. You have to import this package, but you don't have to import all this stuff and configure stuff that you don't quite understand. So that was it. That was my only thought. And then we talked about it. Chris had the idea of having like a CAN 3.4 package that has, that way you don't just have a one-off package, but you could have, maybe there's more of these things. But the only problem is there aren't really any more of these things. I mean, I don't think. There's no more of these kind of code kind of things that I'm aware of anyways, that aren't better handled by code mods. So.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
One thing to I'd like to point out about that snippet of code is it will throw an error if it's run twice. So wherever that code goes, it definitely needs to be in its own module. Definitely, because you don't want to have two separate components importing different code that's calling the same thing and adding the same event. So it's really useful, however we decide, to have that code in a module that can be imported from everywhere and only runs once. So we should keep that in mind.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't know that. I just assumed it would. I mean, I don't know. I didn't really think about it. I would have assumed it would just ignore the second time, maybe, or something.
No, it throws an error. It lets you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good though, because then people will know that they made a mistake.
Yeah.
What is the reason for doing that? Multiple, like not allowing multiple times?
Because you don't want to. Well, you can't understand your system. Is kind of like my reasoning. Like if you're adding an extra event and it's overriding it, like what do? Do you override it? Do you silently ignore it? Throwing an error is like you did something wrong, so that's promoted. Okay. Yeah. And there's ways to get around it.
So that's in case it's not really inserted and removed specific, but it's more like
any custom event.
Two different modules both add the same custom event, and they might be doing different things.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Okay.
And the way you get around that is you can name these custom events anything you want when you go and do add event. You could give them any name. And that's what I did in can/stash bindings for the for the radio change event. That is now namespaced. So anyone else can create a radio change event and can/stash bindings will still work because it's a custom name off of the package. So that's really nice. But yeah, so that will throw an error, which I'm very happy with.
Question. I know in can/stash binding we're including the enter events.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why we're not including inserted and removed as part of can component?
Because, well, I mean, personally, I wouldn't mind dropping the enter event and having people add it on as they needed it, just like inserted and removed. The enter event's only in there because there were tests around it, but we could easily remove it for 4.0. But I'll leave that up to you guys. It's interesting to think.
I'm arguing the other way. I think that it's way more usable if can component just includes inserted and removed, and we don't force people to do something special to get those events. And I'm wondering what the argument is for forcing people to do that on their own.
Okay, so, well, first, what do you mean? Do you mean add it to can component or add it to can/stash bindings?
To can component, because that's where inserted and removed are used, right?
You can use them in can/stash bindings too, like on inserted in a binding.
Yeah.
You used to be able to do that. You can't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So adding it in can/stash bindings would probably be where we want to do it, I think.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay.
So a problem with doing that is then can/stash bindings has to be namespaced. Can/stash bindings is, we can only have one version of it.
Sorry, I don't.
If you had two versions of can/stash bindings and both of them were adding that inserted event, then it would throw an error.
Right.
So we'd have to.
Is can/stash? Yeah. Do we not require a single version of can/stash bindings right now?
No, it's not. I don't think it's stateful at all.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
So we kind of made it stateful with including the enter event, though, already.
Yeah.
Okay.
So theoretically, we should do neither, or maybe include all.
I'm all for neither. The reason why I'm against having the inserted and removed as anything but add-ons is because they're not real. They're custom events, and there's especially for inserted and removed, there's a lot of caveats. I mean, trust me, I know about how the DOM handles those. You can't really observe. Well, the real problem is we're using the DOM event system for dispatching these events, and like say your input is disabled, that event won't fire in Firefox, and it just won't, and there's no fix that we can put on that. So moving away from the DOM, it's I think we have the power. We can't DOM mutate, so we should move as far away as we can. And I think adding it back it's a one-time thing that you do, and you'll only ever do it when you migrate, because no one moving forward with 4.0 is going to use inserted or removed. You have connected callback. So I'd like to leave it behind.
Yeah, the only problem is connected callback is on the view model, but it's not on the events object. I think we talked about maybe having it on the events object as well, even though it won't be an event, it'll just be a function that gets called.
I think we talked about just putting it on the component.
Oh, on the component, okay.
Just allowing connected callback on components.
Yeah, I'm with Chasen that a component library should have a lifecycle of functions, like whether they're DOM events. Like I understand it's not good for it to be a DOM event for some reasons. I get that, but there should be something, right? Is my opinion. I don't care what it's called or how it works, but.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. The reason we had inserted and removed is because we did not have lifecycle hooks. So it was kind of like it was a matter of convenience that we had this thing that was,
Well, it was our lifecycle hook, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
It wasn't
coming from-
implemented that way, but that's what it was. That was its
Yeah.
purpose. But yeah.
And it just had a lot of like baggage associated with it going through mutation observers and whatnot to get that working.
Yeah, it was a clean solution because that way, you know, it's a general event that you can listen to on any element. There's nothing special about it. That's what makes it kind of nice. But anyways, yeah, we should file an issue about this. The only reason, so I guess, yeah, let's talk about this a little bit more. It's currently on the view model. That serves a lot of purposes. I used to work on some code that had a lot of like functions on the events object. Like you would listen to DOM events on the events object, and then you would call some functions. So I don't know if that use case is really served.
It's not. We still encourage people to use the events object for actual like DOM events, right?
Yeah, especially delegate events, because there's not a good way to do those.
Yeah. So yeah, the events object isn't just about or we haven't like replaced all uses for the events object, and I don't think we intend to either.
No.
So I like the idea of a lifecycle hook object that contains all the lifecycle hooks that we can hook into.
Julian, I don't know if you've seen my latest new CAN element API ideas, but it has the lifecycle object, or it might have the lifecycle object. You check that out. That's kind of being interested in CAN element. I don't know how much more we should throw. Oops, I muted myself as I was talking. That was weird. Yeah, I don't know. I was just saying. It's funny to me that we didn't work on CAN. We didn't add any features to CAN component for a very long time, and then all of a sudden we're like adding a bunch of features to CAN component just as we're like transitioning to CAN element. That's weird.
So I want to take us back to the original topic, kind of sidestepping the argument of whether or not like inserted and removed should be included. If we stay on the path that we are and they're not included, I really like the idea that Kevin mentioned that we can have code mods for adding we can have a code mod that checks if a component is using the inserted or removed events, and we can add the DOM events code that's required for hooking those up, and they can include the check that, you know, if like the DOM events has for checking if an event is registered, right, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a public API, but it does have one.
So I think we should just put this in a separate package and add a namespace check to check if this thing's already been imported. And just so that way the code mod can just add a single require statement or a single import and just import that other package.
Just one package just has those like 4 lines of code. That's it.
Yeah, and a namespace check, so it would be like 7 lines of code.
Yeah, that's what I did kind of like Chris's idea of having a package just for CAN 3 to 4 migration. I mean, just having a bunch of these things.
Yeah, I like that too. So because if you have CAN 5 point, well, maybe we have more changes, so we can have a legacy package for all the different versions.
It kind of it points out that this is like something that you not necessarily should be doing. You know what I mean? Like you're importing CAN 3.4 / inserted event or something. So kind of gives you something to look at. Like, oh yeah, I should probably refactor this or something.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to do it in a package with small modules in it is really for discovery. Like, to me, if I saw a package that just said legacy, I'd be like, whoa, this was made in 2007 or something. You know, like legacy is a relative term. So if we have a concrete package name that shows which versions to which, there's a lot more context there. So that's kind of why I preferred the package, so people could understand, when's the appropriate time to use this, and when did it start to become relevant, and when did it die out.
I think that's good. I also think either in that package or in a blog post or something, Chris, you should explain the caveats behind inserted or removed events, why we're going away from them, and why connected callback is better. Because I think that that's a really interesting topic that 2 people in the world know. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of, well, not to take credit because I didn't do any of the work, but I inspired the connected callback thing too. Maybe I did. I don't know. I complained a lot. Is that inspiring? I hope it is, because that's my whole life. Yeah, so I'll definitely write something up about it. I think it's interesting.
Cool. So I think we've agreed we'll have something like a CAN 3.4 package that does this and has the namespace check, and then we'll add that in the via code mods for any components that are using inserted or removed.
Unless we want to add this to CAN bindings.
Yeah.
Because I think we still need to decide that. Because right now CAN bindings is theoretically broken. If you import 2 different versions, it's going to break. So we need to figure out that.
So we kind of have to fix that.
Yeah, we have to fix it one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I would the way I would fix it is to take out the automatic adding of the enter event and have it just like inserted and removed. You can add that if you need it, and then we're back on track. Because I can just make the test pass by adding the event for the particular test, then removing the event. That's what I do when I ran into tests where actual template was doing the on::inserted. I would just, for that particular test, add the custom event and then remove it after the end of the test. So, and those are still good tests to have. They're valuable because they test the custom event logic. So,
are inserted and removed part of the CAN bindings docs? Do we tell people that those are available to them in those docs, or are they just
I don't
part of a CAN component?
I'd be surprised if they were.
They're just in CAN event?
Oh, okay. So in CAN component,
util.
we have, yeah, okay. So in CAN component, we have, or in the 3.0 docs, we have before removed. And then we just mention that CAN whatever adds inserted and removed as well. Okay, question answered. Cool. Should we just file an issue to change the test to not import enter and make that change? Is that what we decided?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'll do that after the meeting.
Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I think we had one more topic. We're at an hour, but especially because Julian's here. Julian, you tweeted about how it'd be nice for CanJS to have a component framework like Quasar. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course I can. So the basic behind a component library is that it is reusable. So you can add fast components that are written from the community maybe, and you can have it like Quasar for the mobile and the desktop version, so you can switch it. It's very nice. I saw in the GitHub I saw on GitHub that somebody make something similar with Bootstrap. I can link it in the description or a post. So I think it's shuttle npm maybe, so something like that. So it's really nice. It's not really it's in product. It's in development right now. So yeah, the question is if there is a possibility to have something like Croissant, a component library. So we have something like that. It's called Bit Component, I think, but they're not really up to date. So and there are small or they are less, not that much. So yeah, it would be nice. So what are your thoughts?
So is this Quasar thing, is it just like a collection of components that work well on mobile, or is it something more than that?
It's it's from Vue.js, I think.
Yeah,
Correct me
yeah.
if I'm wrong. So it's a library about components. It's buttons. It's a hamburger menu. It's a navigation. It's all the stuff you need for
It's specifically
development.
not mobile. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought there are two branches. So the first one maybe is that for the consumer, so it's a mobile app or it's a shopping cart or something like that. And on the other side, I think we can have a branch for the what's it called, enterprise users. So you can have like Bootstrap. You have a whole library for forms and buttons that not really have to focus on user experience. They were good. They were good, and they have their ecosystem. But I like the idea to have two branches for each. So the consumer side for mobile apps or desktop apps, and the enterprise components for rich application, single application apps or Electron apps or something like that. That's not really on a mobile, because you have to deal with different browsers on mobile, like Safari mobile or Chrome or the viewport and all the stuff. So it's really hard to handle all these in one framework, maybe.
So yeah, I like this idea. Kind of, yeah. So let's just think about what's the problem. Like we have had these kinds of things a lot in CanJS, but they've kind of like, they don't get updated, and then someone writes a new one, or they just write it for their specific app. And I was like, well, so why does that happen? Why do we not create more new ones, or why do we not keep these things up to date? I think one of the biggest problems is that we don't use these in like our example apps. Because I've noticed that, like, bit tabs is up to date always, and that's because we have to make it be up to date. So I wonder if we made a mistake when we started creating all of our example apps, in that they're all just kind of they're just using Bootstrap CSS. We haven't created button components and those kinds of things. I wonder if we had started off by making a framework. Design and component framework, then we would be forced to always keep it up to date. It's something for I think that another thing, it's kind of related. Our DoneJS, when you create a fresh DoneJS project, it just says hello world. It's not like super for professional. For a long time, I think we've been wanting to have a better, kind of like how you create a new Rails app and you get like a nice nice CSS and stuff included. We actually had a component framework and it came with DoneJS, then we would have all of our stuff that way, and it would encourage more users to contribute to that maybe.
I think one thing that maybe Justin was alluding to in his reply, which I think he said something like, Bitovi might not be the best to provide it or something. I know we've talked about, and someone brought this up recently, how it would be really helpful for DoneJS to be able to add a base component through the generators and then be able to customize from there. Because I know on a lot of our client projects, the reason why we don't have just a general framework library is because every client project wants to do something custom. But it can be really useful to have like a base implementation and then essentially fork it from there, whether that's within your code base or actually like make a fork of bit tabs or whatever other components. Which is why I think, or I think that's one of the reasons why, like within Bitovi, we would struggle to try and make a general component framework library, because it's not something, I don't think it's something that we would use other than example apps, and then we'd want to fork stuff within our own client projects.
Because that you're right, but my clients didn't bother about design. Because I'm programming enterprise solutions, so they are not. I use Bootstrap, so they are all the enterprise solutions are with Bootstrap, so they don't care about their corporate identity in their app. So it's they don't care about that. So I think if we have a enterprise component library, for me, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe other clients won't have their corporate identity into their app. But if it's working and the app is working and it's a good user experience for the user itself, so why should we have customize all buttons for colors like yellow, green, all the stuff like the. So maybe that's the enterprise solution, but if I'm wrong, maybe other clients would have their own custom colors inside that.
I agree with you, Julian, that it would be super valuable to have. And this is more talking about Bitovi's corporate strategy, but one of our goals is, or like our main mission is to make it easier to build awesome applications. So being able to prototype an app with example components or from a component library, to be able to build an app quickly, I think that aligns with Bitovi's goals. It's just not something that we've been able to invest our time in, but it would be.
It's not just the way it looks, though. I mean, the component library is more than just the CSS. And
Yeah.
even that's the case, clients can overwrite CSS as extendable. You can overwrite CSS.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
There's definitely I don't know why anyone would write a new tabs widget for canned component. There's already a pretty decent one out there. So if it's just a bunch of stuff like that, low level stuff, and yeah, some default styles that can be overwritten. I think DoneJS, DoneJS is what DoneJS is it gives you everything, and this is a thing that people should have.
Yeah, but I think if we had something like a component library, we get more users. The community will grow much faster than right now, because right now you have to build all the stuff from scratch, right? You have the examples maybe for that, but if you want to make a button component, you have to build it from scratch, and it's a simple component, right? But it's not there. So and there are complicated. There are difficult components like a hamburger menu or something like that. So yeah, I think the community will grow. Like you see Vue.js, for 5 years ago, Vue.js never know, and nobody knows about Vue.js, and now they have a component library, a big component library, and it's still growing because you can build faster apps really fast.
I have a question about that. Does Vue, do they make their own component library? Is that something like that the core team works on, or all like outside user contributions? I don't know if you know, Julian, but I'm curious if that's something that the core team works on.
I think yes. Sorry, it's dark here. Yeah, I think yes. There is because it's linked on the homepage, right? And it's they have different projects, and I think it's a project from the core members. They are supporting it. So
one other thing kind of related to this is I think as we build up more and more example apps for the CanJS site, it might be worth us not only just building apps, but like here's a how-to of how we build like a tabs component that we would have available as bit tabs or whatever for people to use generically, but also as a teaching method of here's how you would build something like that. I know we have stuff like that in our demos in the like individual like package docs, but maybe investing that as part of our guides too would be valuable. And that also helps a little bit solve the problem of like, we don't have, like BitTabs gets updated because it's in the DoneJS example apps, but other things aren't because they're not part of our examples.
Yeah, and I think it's as easy as we're building these things already, kind of, not all of them. We don't have like the hamburger menu, but maybe if we wanted to update place mode or make it look better, we would make it mobile first or something, and we would have a hamburger menu, and we should make that a public available package because why not? And that would kind of solve the problem indirectly.
So for a while, Justin was doing those weekly widgets or whatever. Maybe that's something that we can like put together a list of widgets that we want to create guides out of, or short recipes or whatever we call them, and we can either ask for contributions from the community, and maybe the core team can help review those and review the code and that kind of thing, but actually get external people to submit them and put them on DoneJS.com or CanJS.com or wherever. That way, it's kind of the core team working together with the community to make this list of widgets.
I think that's a really good idea.
Good topic.
Yeah, good topic. Glad we ran over. Cool. Anything else anyone wanted to say before we go? Okay, cool.
I miss everyone, that's all. That's what I have to say.
Oh. Okay, thanks everyone for coming. Everyone who's watching on YouTube and made it this far, thank you for watching. And see you guys in 2 weeks. Talk to you then.